Detroit was once the richest, most powerful industrial city in America. It was the beating heart of the automobile, and the whole world knew its name. Today, whole neighborhoods stand empty and silent. Grass grows through the floors of factories that once fed a nation. This is the story of the city that the engine built. And this is how it fell apart. To understand the fall, you first have to understand the rise. Our story begins more than a century ago. In the early 1900s, one city became the center of a new machine. That machine was the automobile. And that city was Detroit. People began to call it the Motor City. No other place on earth built automobiles the way Detroit did. Three giant companies grew up here together: Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. The Big Three. Together, they turned this city into the workshop of the world. At the front of it all stood one man: Henry Ford. In 1913, Ford perfected the moving assembly line. Suddenly a car could be built in a fraction of the time it once took. Prices fell, and ordinary families could finally own a car. The automobile had escaped the wealthy. Now it belonged to everyone. In 1914, Ford stunned the world with the $5 day. It nearly doubled the pay of an ordinary man on the line. Now Ford's own workers could afford the very cars they built. And to build all those cars, Detroit needed workers. Hundreds of thousands of them. People poured in from across the country, chasing steady work and good pay. Many came north from the American South, looking for a better life. The factories ran day and night, and the city swelled with newcomers. The workers organized, and formed a powerful union. The UAW. Union jobs paid high wages, with benefits few workers had ever known. A factory worker could buy a home, a car, and raise a family in comfort. Detroit did not just build cars. It built the American middle class. Those good wages built a working middle class, both black and white. A steady factory job was a ticket into a comfortable American life. The city grew rich, proud, and enormous. Then, when war came, Detroit turned its factories to a new purpose. During World War II, the city became the arsenal of democracy. Its plants stopped building cars and began building tanks and planes. Bombers rolled from its lines in numbers the enemy could not match. Detroit's factories helped arm the nation and win the war. When peace returned, the plants roared back to civilian life. The post-war years became the greatest boom the city had ever seen. Families bought new homes, new cars, and dreamed bigger than ever. By 1950, Detroit's population peaked at about 1.85 million people. It was one of the largest cities in all of America. And it stood as a symbol of American manufacturing might. This was the golden age of the Motor City. In the middle of the century, Detroit was on top of the world. This, many would later say, was the high water mark of the Motor City. Its cars rolled off the lines and out across the entire planet. Detroit exported not just cars, but prosperity itself. And it exported something else. An idea. The assembly line was copied in factory after factory, country after country. The way Detroit built cars became the way the world built everything. For a while, it seemed like the good times would never end. Detroit gave the world speed, style, and the roar of a big engine. Its cars became icons of freedom and the open American road. Detroit's greatness was not only industrial. It was cultural too. From this city rose a sound the world would come to love. Motown. Its music carried the name of Detroit far beyond the factory gates. For a moment, Detroit gave America both its cars and its soundtrack. But every empire that rises high has the farthest to fall. And the first cracks were already beginning to show. The trouble did not come all at once. It crept in from many directions. The first blow came from across the ocean. Car makers in Japan and Germany began sending cars to America. They were smaller, cheaper, and often better built. At first, Detroit did not take them seriously. But year after year, the imports took more and more of the market. Then, in 1973, came the oil crisis. Fuel prices soared almost overnight, and gas grew scarce. Detroit's big, thirsty, gas-guzzling cars suddenly looked foolish. Drivers wanted small, efficient cars. And those came from abroad. A second oil crisis struck in 1979, and the pain deepened. Inside the factories, another change was quietly underway. Machines and automation began to replace human workers on the line. A job that once took 10 people could now be done by a few, and a robot. Each new machine on the line meant fewer paychecks in the city. Slowly, the great army of Detroit workers began to shrink. The mighty union that once seemed invincible began to lose members by the thousands. And the companies themselves started to leave. New factories were built where land and labor were cheaper. First they moved to the American South. Then, later, across the border into Mexico. Every factory that left took thousands of Detroit jobs with it. Deindustrialization spread through the city like a slow, rising tide. The work that had built Detroit was leaving, and it would not return. At the same time, the people themselves were leaving the city. Families with money moved out to the growing suburbs. New highways made it easy to live far away and drive into the city. And so the suburbs grew richer while the city grew poorer. This great exodus drained the city of residents and wealth. It was called white flight, and it hollowed out entire neighborhoods. Then, in the summer of 1967, tensions exploded. Days of unrest tore through the city and left deep scars. In the years that followed, the flight out of Detroit only accelerated. Block by block, the city began to empty. Meanwhile, the big three were losing their grip on the world. The dominance they once took for granted was slipping away. As sales fell, more plants closed, and more jobs simply vanished. And as the people left, the money left with them. A city runs on taxes, and Detroit's tax base was collapsing. Every family that left shrank the money the city had to survive on. Fewer people meant less money for schools, police, and streetlights. And the fewer services there were, the more people chose to leave. It became a spiral, pulling the city downward, year after year. Nowhere was the decline more visible than in the ruins. The Packard plant had once built luxury automobiles. Now it stood abandoned, a vast, crumbling shell of broken glass and concrete. Trees pushed up through its floors as nature slowly reclaimed the ruins. Photographers came from around the world to capture the decay. These ruins became the haunting symbol of a fallen giant. Once, this had been the proudest city in industrial America. By 2013, the numbers told the whole grim story. The population had fallen from 1.85 million people, down to roughly 700,000. More than half the city was simply gone. Tens of thousands of buildings sat empty and abandoned. Whole blocks that once buzzed with life now stood quiet and dark. Fire and neglect claimed thousands of those empty homes over the years. And then came the moment no great American city had ever faced on this scale. On July 18, 2013, Detroit filed for bankruptcy. It was Chapter 9, the bankruptcy of an entire city government. The debt was estimated at $18 to $20 billion. It was the largest municipal bankruptcy in United States history. The Motor City, the engine of America, had gone broke. It was a moment that stunned the entire nation. The city the automobile built could no longer pay its own bills. But the story of Detroit does not end in the ruins. Since that low point, there have been signs of life. Investment flowed back into the downtown core. New businesses opened, and old buildings were brought back to life. A new generation of Detroiters refused to give up on their city. Some neighborhoods began, slowly, to come back. There is real hope in the streets of Detroit again. But recovery is uneven, and far from complete. Beyond the bright downtown, many neighborhoods still stand empty. The city today is only a fraction of the giant it once was. So what does the fall of Detroit really tell us? In many ways, Detroit's story is the story of the automobile itself. A machine can build a great city, almost overnight. But when that machine's world changes, the city can be left behind. Detroit bet everything on one industry, and one kind of engine. For a while, that bet made it the richest city in the land. And when the world moved on, the city could not move with it. Detroit rose higher than almost any city before it. And it fell farther than anyone thought possible. It is a warning, and it is a memory, cast in steel and concrete. The rise, and the fall, of the machines that shaped our world. That is the story Gasoline Ghosts was made to tell. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.